Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and it is week 24 of my 55K page challenge, where I have challenged myself to read 55,000 pages across print, digital, and audio books. And what have I been reading last week? Well, the first culprit is all the fault of Michael K. Vaughan. A couple of weeks ago, he did a video about one of his 100 favorite books, which was The Shrinking Man by Richard Matheson. Now, this is a book that I have read before, and for whatever reason, I unhauled my paperback. And I was very sorry I did that because I wanted to reread it after watching his video. But Amazon came through, and shortly afterwards, The Shrinking Man appeared on sale for $1.99. And when Amazon shows me a $1.99 Kindle book, it's almost impossible to say no. And I read this last week. And it is really an excellent science fiction novel. The premise is an ordinary man. He's out on a boat, and he gets encased in this fog, goes through this fog. And afterwards, he starts shrinking 1/7 of an inch per day. And the story follows this man as he is shrinking. But it also follows the story of him trapped in his basement when he is less than an inch tall. And he is having an issue with a spider because he is very tiny and he is very much going to be spider food if he does nothing about this. So you got two stories in this novel of him shrinking and dealing with his wife and his child and how it is to be a grown man shrinking. And some of that story is really kind of interesting because Richard Matheson went through and really thought about it, what it would be like to be an adult male who's 2 feet tall, and he's all proportionally sized. He has his own same sexual desires that I always had, but his wife is 5'5" or something like that, and he's 2 feet tall. So what is he supposed to do? And how is he supposed to battle this spider in his basement? You'll have to read this and find out. And the ending of this book is fabulous. It truly shows that Richard Matheson thought about the science, about what it means to shrink 1/7 of an inch per day. And the big issue this man had is that when he's only 1/7 of an inch tall, what happens the next day? Well, you'll have to read this and find out. It is truly a great science fiction novel. After that, I was sort of dithering about what to read. And I was so impressed by how menacing that ordinary spider was to a man 2/7 of an inch tall, and how he would deal with it. So I picked up another book about spiders. And this is Came a Spider. And this is a killer animal book about, again, spiders. And in this case, it is a boy who goes out into the deserts of California with his new hunting rifle, and he sees a very, very large spider next to a forbidden zone run by the government with gates saying, "Do not enter." And there's a large spider. It has the number 86 on its back. And the boy messes with the spider and gets bit. And let's just say it goes into some very implausible science after this. And you'll have to forgive the author of the horror novel for implausible science, but it's interesting. It's exciting. It's much better than most killer animal books. Much better than The Killer Flies, which I read last year, or was it earlier this year? Earlier this year I read The Killer Flies, about killer flies, and that was just a nonplussed, no good killer animal book. Early last year I read Slime by Haskins, and that was another bad killer animal book. But this one is a good killer animal book. You can feel the menacingness of the spiders in this book. And they are big tarantulas. They have a a leg span of up to 13 inches. Well, isn't, of course, truly giant spiders, but I would not want to meet a tarantula with a 13-inch leg span. And it's not just one of them. There are millions of them. And again, it goes into flaky science here, but, forgive the author for that. And it has some really good killer animal scenes. It has the obligatory naked teenager scene having sex. And let's see, what happens to these teenagers as they're having sex? Can you guess? It's a pretty good killer animal book, and if you like that genre, I can highly recommend it. After that, I went a little more serious and went for my Ancients-a-thon, and I read a play by Moliere, and this was Tartuffe. And this is the story of a noble family, noble man, who's become, let's just say, enraptured with this man named Tartuffe. And Tartuffe is a charlatan. And it's all about how this charlatan is gaining control over this family, and how the man wants to marry off his daughter to Tartuffe and is willing to give away in sign of all his property to Tartuffe. And the daughter is, of course, in love with another man. And this is a story of how you deal with charlatans. And what's interesting is this book was written in 1690-something. And obviously, Moliere knew all about charlatans and how people believe charlatans, and how once you believe a charlatan, it is almost impossible to stop believing in that charlatan. And there is just a very telling scene towards the end where Tartuffe has been proven to be a charlatan, he's been proven to be a liar, but there are still some people who deny the fact that he's a liar and a charlatan and continue want to believe in him. Has any modern remnants? Can you think of any modern samples of that? I can. Now, what's really interesting about this book is that it is written in rhymed verse, because that's the way it was done in the original French. And some of the rhymed verse is a little strained, I guess. I mean, it's a very good translation other than that, and it gives you a feel, but Tartuffe, good play. After Tartuffe, I started reading another ebook that was The Sacrament by Olaf Olafsson. It is about Iceland. It starts off with a boy being locked into a closet and a priest falling to his death. And there is a nun who in college in Paris learned Icelandic. So she is sent off to investigate. And I did DNF this book at about 100 pages. It wasn't a bad book. It just wasn't captivating me at the time. So I decided to move on to read something else. And that book was the one that fell on the floor. That was Ed McBain's Killer's Payoff from the 87th Precinct. And this is a book set in the late 50s when it was written. And it is a very good police procedural. It starts off with a man walking down the street, and all of a sudden a car peels around the corner, and you hear the tires screeching, and a rifle appears out of the window and shoots him dead. So the police have to find out who killed this man. And it is an interesting investigation. The police have characters, but it's a little bit different from most series. It doesn't feel like it's a continuating series. It just feels like Ed McBain is writing the same characters and fitting them into slots to get the story of the police procedural down. I know Criminale might disagree with me a little bit about that. I know he's very fond of Ed McBain, but I did enjoy this. And the resolution of the mystery was pretty satisfactory. And I also read an audiobook. And this was The Cruel Sea by Nicholas Monsaratt. And it is the story of the British Navy starting off at the beginning of World War II, where you're getting some raw recruits onto a ship called a corvette. This is a brand new ship, just commissioned, going out for a sail. It has its captain, it has its officers, and it is a story of these people. It takes them from the beginning of the World War II to the end. And it's about convoys going across the Atlantic and how they protect them, and how these officers live their lives on the ship and off the ship. Now, it was recommended by another booktuber. I cannot remember who recommended it. It was a video. I'm thinking maybe it was Steve Donahue, maybe someone else. But I really enjoyed this. It is not a really plot-driven book. It's more of an episode-driven, because there's no real story other than the story of these men on this ship. And yeah, I can highly recommend that as well. Also, for Ancients-a-thon, I finished up reading some Plato, and this was the Phaedo. This is the last of the trilogy of dialogues known as the Last Days of Socrates, and this is the story of Socrates' last day before he had to commit suicide by drinking the hemlock. And in the story of how the soul survives after death, and why I appreciate some of the writing and some of the imagery, I was not at all convinced by any of Socrates' arguments for the existence of the soul after death. Even so, I think this is a worthy dialogue for people to read, because you can see people having dialogues on essentially the same sort of subject nowadays. If you watch certain YouTube videos on particular like atheism and talking about the existence of God and which religions are true. So people are always arguing about this. So it is a worthwhile dialogue to read. And after that, I listened to, it's really just a short story, about 35 pages on Audible. And that was Deep Hole by Don Wislow. I am most familiar with his trilogy known as The Power of the Dog, about the drug cartel in Mexico. And that is a fabulous trilogy. But this is a story of a surfer set in Rhode Island. And it starts off in the story, it says, yes, there are surfers in Rhode Island. And this is the story of a surf bum who likes to gamble. And he gambles with the mob. And he gets a little bit into debt. And his best friend works for the mob, and his best friend is basically told, you better collect from this guy, Eddie, or bad things will happen to you too. And let's just say they come up with a scheme where nothing could go wrong. You know what, something's going to go wrong. And this is an hour, and I really enjoyed it. The end surprised me a little. It went in a slightly different direction than I thought it was going to. And it is a good story. It is, as far as I know, only available on Audible at this time. So if you want to read it, you basically have to listen to it on Audible. And I do recommend it. After that, I read 3 short stories by Vonnegut for my reading of the Welcome to the Monkey House with Big Hard Books and Classics and Stephanie Cohen. And I didn't read all the stories. I probably should have read a few more stories, but the best one was Tom Edison's Shaggy Dog. And for people who like dogs, they're going to like that story. And that's what I read this week, for a total of 1,396 pages, for a total yearly read of 30,972. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good day. Goodbye.